Welcome, everybody. My apologies for our late start. Adila, can we start off with a roll call, please?
Yes. Mendoza? Here. Halpern?
Here.
Tanya Booty?
Here.
Hernandez?
Here.
Chow? Here. Lindsay Ryan?
Here.
Cartha?
Here. Rebecca?
I move that the Board of Education approve tonight's board meeting agenda as presented.
Second.
Mendoza?
Yes.
Halpern?
Yes.
Tanya Booty?
Yes.
Hernandez?
Yes.
Chow?
Yes.
Lindsay Ryan?
Yes.
Cartha?
Yes. We'll start off our meeting with some district recognitions at our high five.
Thank you very much. Good evening. I'm very excited to celebrate for the first year, for this school year, our district-wide program to recognize employees for their outstanding work. This is the third year of the High Five Celebrating Excellence in District 65 Staff Recognition Program. The program began in 2017 as an opportunity to publicly acknowledge the incredibly dedicated members of our team and engage our community in the important work of school every day. We also give thanks to Byline Bank for their continued support of the High Five program. Through their sponsorship this year, each recipient will receive a $100 gift card, a frame recognition certificate, and an invite to a celebratory luncheon with all the year's recipients to be held in May. As a reminder, all members of our community are able to submit a nomination via our online form located at the District 65 website. Each month through May, we will recognize one licensed staff member and one educational support staff member. Tonight, we have the pleasure of recognizing two very dedicated employees, Ms. Stephanie Abadaya and Mr. Ruben Mendoza, and we'd like to invite them to come forward at this time to the podium, and we'd like to share some remarks. Following these remarks, we'll also take a photo, so we can have that to do as well with that. First of all, we'd like to recognize Stephanie. Stephanie is a music teacher at Dawes and Kingsley Elementary School and has been part of the District 65 family for 13 years. She was nominated by her colleague, Hillier Linden, who could not be here this evening, but shared some remarks about Stephanie's behalf. Stephanie exuberates positivity every day at Dawes. I have worked with Stephanie for the past 8 years, and if you ask me each year who was the hardest working and most dedicated teacher I know, it would be her, hands down. Stephanie was made to teach. She is involved in so much in our school and the Evanston community. She supports our students and gives them the confidence to perform in front of the entire school. She is always thoughtful, encouraging to all of her colleagues, and always willing to help out. She is someone who will take on extra work if it makes someone else's life easier, and she does it with a smile. Stephanie is kind, genuine, has positive relationships with her student and colleagues. I hope my kids one day are lucky enough to have a teacher like Stephanie. Said so well. Can we all give Stephanie a round of applause? Next, we would like to recognize Mr. Ruben Mendoza. He is currently serving as a head custodian at Washington Elementary School and has been a part of our District 65 family for 27 years. He was nominated by a colleague who wished to remain anonymous but shared these remarks. Senior Mendoza notices so many things that allow students to have a safe learning environment. He works constantly to find and solve problems before anyone can think twice. He knows each student in our school by name, and families adore him. He is a gentleman, hard worker, and a friend. And once, when our class was walking to music, I noticed a puddle underneath the water fountain. By the time I dropped the kids off, he had it cleaned up and put a wet floor sign out. He has repaired the bathroom, my classroom heat, our air conditioner. He checks to make sure everything is in order. Mr. Mendoza is a gentleman, and we are lucky enough to get a hand-me-down computer cart from our middle school. But getting up the stairs was a Herculean feat. He would not allow teachers to help. He told us, "You need to save your bodies for the classroom." Over a 3-year weekend, the cart was magically right outside our classrooms. Mr. Mendoza is a friend to students. He regularly greets our students in the hallway, checks on them during lunch, and laughs with them as well. I've never worked at a school or an organization that was so well taken care of. The physical building and the people within it can all attribute their safety and support to Mr. Mendoza. Thank you, Ruben, for all the work that you've done for the Washington community. Let's give him a round of applause. On behalf of the school board and the district leadership team, we would like to thank both of you for your care and dedication, and we'd like to present you with certificates and invite our board president to come up with a quick photo. Would you please come forward?
This way? Yeah, I think they're coming to you. Okay. Yeah, you're okay. Stay where you are. Oh, you're good. Right. It's okay, it's my chance.
The second recognition we'd like to do this evening is each November in the state of Illinois, the governor denotes that as being School Board Members Month. And specifically this week is School Board Members Day. So board, your pay is going to be doubled this week. We just want you to know.
Math lesson for our
There you
kids.
go. That's right. That's right. Good math lesson. We are fortunate that our board members are entirely focused on the success of those in their care, not for self-interest. Together, they have demonstrated resolve to attain a vision of high expectations for student achievement, rigorous instruction, equity, and restorative practices. They uphold shared beliefs about all that is possible, directing the administration to create the conditions in which students and staff can flourish. This board recognizes a tremendous opportunity to invest in the staff and to target their learning as part of the commitment for continually improving. They ensure that educators, administrators all across the district receive impactful training, professional development, and the resources needed so all students can thrive to meet the challenging needs. Another characteristic of this board is their pursuit for collaborative relationships with the staff and the community. This board is committed to transparency, collaboration, and engagement. It is our humble opinion that school board members are superheroes. Only extraordinary people voluntarily tackle the enormous job of governing school districts and holding themselves accountable for achieving continued excellence for all stakeholders. As stewards of the community resources, our entire school board has diligently created exceptional educational opportunities for students, while also providing the community with a tremendous value for the tax dollars. Their actions and decisions affect the present and future lives of the children who attend District 65. Won't you join me in thanking the school board for all their service to our students, most importantly, to our teachers, family, and the community. So board, you have in front of you a book, and if you would open your book, you'll see in there that there is a label in there which thanks you for all the work that you have done. And these books will be placed back into the library where they need to go with their recent purchases. And we thought this was a great way to honor you for all that you have done with that as well. So from the bottom of all of our hearts, we'd like to thank you, Board, for your recognition on that and for all the hard work that you do each and every day in a tireless fashion with that as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those kind words, and thank you to everybody here and out there. Our work is as good as the team that we have at this table and out there, so thank you for all you do. And thank you for this lovely way to honor. I can't think of anything better than putting books in libraries as a way to a lovely honor for us, so thank you very much for that. Is that?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, does any board statements?
Yeah, I have one.
Oh, okay.
So November is National Native American History Month, and I would like to invite us to acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional custodians of the land, of which we are meeting today. So traditionally, these are the homelands of people of the Council of the Three Fires. They are the Ojibwe, the Potawatomi, and the Odawas, as well as the Menominee, Miami, and the Ho-Chunk Nation. Recognizing that we are on stolen land is important because it acknowledges that we are present in the United States as a collection of chopped up territories and land purchased, accumulated by genocide. We are thankful to be able to be here and to have this event and to have our school district here today. We ask that everyone be conscious of the place on the native lands of the North America and our role in colonialism. So remembering the history and honoring the contributions and traditions of the indigenous peoples is one step towards fighting their erasure. We pay respects to the elders and we present and extend our recognition to their descendants. It is within District 65's responsibility as an academic institution to disseminate the misinformation about Native people as well as the history attached to them. Consistent with our district's commitment to equity, District 65 must work proactively to acknowledge racial and cultural biases and eliminate institutional structures and practices that have affected student learning and achievement, working towards culturally relevant teaching practices that reflect the contributions of our Native peoples and the respective, in respects to our academics pursuits, our partnerships, our historical recognitions, community service, and enrollment efforts.
Thank you, Rebecca. Anybody else?
I just wanted to say a short thank you. A few weeks ago, the staff and children, students of Haven put on a wonderful show, the Lion King Jr. I'm looking out actually at the mother of one of the stars of the show. And I just wanted to show, from sitting in the audience, it was appreciative to see the care and love that those cast members had for one another and helping each other explore their talent, as well as what Ms. Quinn in putting it together and the team that she formed, both cast and crew. And I just want to acknowledge just some of the beauty that is happening in our schools. So, thanks.
Thank you. Anything else?
Oh, yes, one really quick thing. So on Wednesday night at the high school, they're showing No Small Matter, and this is an initiative
yes,
and a
thank
partnership that we have through multiple stakeholders in the community. And so I just wanted to invite the community to please join us for a viewing that will be subtitled in Spanish. It starts at 6:30.
There will be dinner provided at 5, and then the
Okay,
programming, I
dinner.
believe, starts at 6.
Perfect. So yeah, I just wanted to invite the community out to that. Please support. It's the one of 3 other events that we hope to bring awareness to early childhood. So hope to see a full auditorium.
Yeah, and there will be childcare.
And there is childcare provided.
A dinner will be provided, there will be the showing, and then a panel discussion afterwards. So yes, it should be a really great evening, and it will be great for all to come. Switching gears, I would like to take this opportunity to make a brief statement regarding the reported sexual assault at Haven. This situation is extremely upsetting to all of us. The primary focus of our school and district administrators have been to support the student and her family, all of the students at Haven, and to ensure a thorough review of safety measures throughout the district in order to implement improvements as identified. We are unable to share information beyond the communications already released by the district and school. Our administrators remain in regular contact with the Evanston Police Department and the Department of Children and Family Services, who have been actively investigating this report since it was first shared last month. They have informed us that the investigation remains ongoing. While we all want answers, we have been informed from the beginning by police that an investigation of this kind can take some time. We have participated and cooperated fully, providing every record, video footage, and access to staff and facilities to promote a thorough and just resolution. I would like to reiterate that any employee potentially involved in this reported incident was immediately placed on a leave of absence and remains on leave without access to Haven or any school in the district. Recent news reports suggest that the employee potentially involved has been reassigned, which is completely false. Our district has provided Haven with focused administrative support over the past several weeks. We also recognize the importance of tending to the social and emotional well-being of students during this difficult time. In the week following the reported incident, additional mental health staff was reassigned to support the Haven community. Mental health staff continue to be available to all students as needed. Administrators at all of our schools have closely reviewed school safety procedures and asked the police to review them as well, looking for improvements. This included engaging an outside security company to provide feedback. The district has installed an additional video camera at Haven, is in the process of adding alarms to exterior doors that are not regularly used during the school day, and it has implemented additional training for administrators across the district. I would like to thank the educators and staff at Haven for their care of students during this difficult time. The safety and overall well-being of our students will continue to be our most important priority. Our leadership team has committed to providing ongoing communication regarding this matter and will provide updates as they are available. With that, we will move on to public comments. Members of the public are welcome and invited to address the Board of Education during open public meetings. Speakers are discouraged from using the public comment period to air concerns about or voice personal attacks against specific district employees, being mindful that the public comment period is not a suitable forum for fact-finding or resolution of disputes. Rather, we strongly encourage members of the public who have concerns about specific district employees to communicate with us following district communication guidelines available in our student handbook. Please remember, when you come up to the podium, to state your name and that you have 3 minutes to address the board. Our first speaker will be Jeremy Wilson.
I'm Jeremy Wilson. I live in the Orrington District. The board received in its packet a summary of the district's 2019 statewide testing results. The most missing table was the result of testing in third grade, the lowest grade reported. Very little was different from last year. White student English language proficiency was high, and Black and Hispanic proficiency was low. More than 3/4 of all white third graders met the criterion. Only 1 in 4 Black children met the criterion. Less than 1/3 of Hispanic third graders met the criterion. Results were very similar in mathematics and for 4th to 8th graders. Please recognize that these third graders are the children who were identified in the 2016 Black Student Achievement Report who had entered kindergarten that year and for whom the district had ISIL scores. At that time, we learned Black children were substantially less ready to read and compute than white students. What interventions were provided in response to that knowledge? Did they receive more instruction time in language arts and mathematics? Were those who were behind separated from the children who were already reading and given extra attention? If the required time allocated for language and mathematics instruction is insufficient to prepare a Black or Hispanic child to read or compute, what alternative is available to the kindergarten teacher? Can those who are behind be separated from those who are ahead? Has the board ever stated that the limited achievement of Black and Hispanic children is unacceptable? Did the board consider in its contract negotiations with DEC establishing goals with financial incentives in the contract conditioned on the improvement of minority student achievement? Has DEC ever stated what improvements in classroom conditions are needed to improve the achievement of minority children? In January, the board will receive the annual accountability report. Last year, the board did not take up discussion of the report until it had been in session for over 3 hours. I urge the board to schedule the report as the first item of business in January. There is no need for show and tell. Its implications need to be discussed. Maybe you could ask the DEC president to identify several kindergarten teachers and have a public discussion of what needs to change. When you brush your teeth at night, do you ask the person in the mirror, have I done everything I can to correct the inequities for minority children in the district? Thank you.
Thank you. Alice Berry.
Good evening. Excuse me, Alice Berry on the Board of Opal. I really just wanted to ask 2 questions, and I don't know if there will be opportunities to get answers during the meeting tonight, but in case there are, my first question is about something on the discipline and suspension report that I'm hoping someone, possibly Dr. Kilgatti, can answer during this evening's discussion. Much of the data is trending in a good direction, which is good news. On page 2, it says that the number of cases where the student participated in the family counseling program dropped from 66 to 24, which is a drop to about 1/3 of what it was the previous year. And I'm curious about why it dropped so precipitously, and I didn't see a suggestion as to why that might have happened. Was that about policy or staffing or what? My other question was about the state report card. I agree with some of the things that Jeremy was saying. Again, I see things, some things trending in a good direction. The disparities are still glaring, but beginning to narrow a bit. And I'm encouraged to see some new categories reported that can have, I'm sure, a huge impact on students' school experiences, like being in foster care. And here again, there was one thing that kind of stuck out, and that was science. What happened with science? 79 fewer students were proficient in science, of whom I think 29 are Black, if I read the data correctly. So I'm wondering again, is that about curriculum? Is that about staffing or policy or what? Thanks very much.
Thank you. Michael Neighbors.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Michael Neighbors. I represent the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People for Evanston and North Shore. What I'm about to read and share with you, you've received already in a letter that I wrote and sent to you on November 13th, but I thought it would be important to share for a matter of public record. The Evanston branch of the NAACP would like to go on record to publicly condemn recent acts of hate and bias crimes enacted in the town of Evanston. And we specifically point out letters sent via U.S. mail to Kingsley Elementary and Park School containing hateful, racist, and biased language. We believe at the NAACP that this constitutes criminal negligence. Hate crimes are criminal acts motivated by bias or prejudice towards particular groups of people. While we're not aware of District 65 or the Evanston Police Department naming the letters as actual crimes, the NAACP categorically and overwhelmingly charges the writer or writers of these letters as criminals. They are attacking the civility of our public school district. They are attacking the conscience of people of goodwill. They are attacking the developing minds of our town's children. They are attacking the workplace of our teachers, staff, and administrators. They are attacking the undergirding belief and hope that people of all races, all ethnic backgrounds and nationalities, all colors, all sexual orientations are able to live together in harmony and unity. Last year, District 65 was confronted with children using the N-word on playgrounds of schools throughout our town. Also last year at King Lab, a report was released sharing that 0 Black students in that school were on track for college. In 2015, an academic report card reflected the nefarious disparity existing between Black and brown students and their white counterparts in District 65. The problems are growing. The NAACP shares all of this to suggest to the district that the issue of racist mail, words of racism, and racist acts cannot be solved with a sole focus within the district. The time has come for District 65, District 202, the City of Evanston, the Evanston Police Department, the Evanston Fire Department, the Downtown Business Association, community organizations, all houses of worship, Northwestern and Garrett, Amita St. Francis, Evanston Hospital, and all companies and organizations to unite in a singular force to call out racism in our town. District 65 will not be able to end the trends of racism within its system if it continues to be surrounded by racism outside of its system. At one point, some town or city, some metropolitan, urban, suburban, or rural community must have the moral courage to rise up and say, racism will not live in our town. I hope that District 65 will play a leading role in helping Evanston to be that town. The Evanston NAACP commits itself to partner with you in making that happen. Thank you.
Ren Heckathorn.
Hi, my name is Ren. My pronouns are they, them, theirs, and I teach at Park. I was hoping that this would organically happen through the Equity Week and as we begin to look at how to make this district safer for LGBTQ plus people. But I am making a request that we add pronouns to everyone's name tags on this board so that we can begin to show the importance of this starting in this room.
Julie Neely.
Good evening. I am a 10-year parent of District 65, and my kids have benefited from thoughtful teachers and strong leadership at our neighborhood school. Thank you. Also, thank you to the board for serving and being willing to take on these difficult issues that affect all of our families. Today, I am here to speak with you about the LGBTQ curriculum that was recently introduced. It was clear, just to go back to my kids, it was clear as far back as 2009 when my child was in kindergarten that he was learning about the members of our LGBTQ community. This is no surprise. This is what our community looks like, and this is what he would eventually realize members of our own family look like. My kid would sometimes ask questions after school about something he'd heard from a friend or read in a library book, and I did my best to answer with love and respect based on our beliefs and what he was able to handle at the time. He was asking simple questions, I gave him simple answers. I don't object to teaching legitimate history and identifying historical figures and looking and appreciating the different families in our communities. After all, this is our neighborhood. These are the people we live our lives with. But much of the content on sex and gender in the lower grades is too much too soon. Not all children have the cognitive development to process these complex ideas on gender identification and sexuality. I believe it's harmful. One day, my child recognized that members of our own family had a unique family structure. He was still young, first or second grade, and he asked me, "Where's their mom? How come I've never met my cousin's mom?" I was able to answer his question as simply as possible and wait to see what else he asked. What did he want to know? He was still young. He wasn't ready for the details and complexities of how his cousins came to be without a mom. He only wanted to know, where is their mom? The simple answer is, they have two dads that love them and they don't have a mom. As years passed, his questions got more complicated, and we continue to do our best to lovingly and respectfully answer. My point is, it is my responsibility as a parent to know and protect my child from facts and experiences they can't handle. Much of the content geared to the kindergarten to third grade level is too much, too soon. You guys are wrong about this. There must be a way to revise the content to respect and honor members of our LGBTQ community and preserve the well-being of kids who are not quite ready to receive such complex concepts. We must do better. We really, really must. So please consider.
Jessica Haka.
Good evening, my name is Jessica Haka. I have two children in the district. Last month, my husband and I wrote a letter of concern to the board about the LGBTQ+ Equity Week curriculum that was signed by 50 other community members in support. I'm here to present 4 sets of challenges and requests with respect to the district's Equity Week decisions on behalf of my spouse and myself. First, we challenge the district's decision to mandate the Equity Week curriculum. Neither the board nor district administration has answered our questions about who made the decision to mandate the Equity Week lessons and how. Summer learning projects do not usually become mandated curriculum apart from an administrative process or board policy, let alone with advance notice. District 65 teachers were notified that they'd have to teach the lessons only 3 weeks prior to implementation, which is professionally disrespectful. And I've been in education 20 years and worked with almost 150 school districts, so I'm speaking from experience on that front. Please explain the process, timeline, and catalysts for that decision. We challenge the district's decision to disallow opt-outs. We know that outside lawyers determined that Equity Week lessons did not constitute sex education and that the district wasn't legally required to provide opt-outs. That there was a request for legal review suggests that at least some leaders believed that aspects of the lessons may constitute sex education. Sex ed isn't explicitly defined in the Illinois School Code or in ISB's guidance documents. How did the lawyers define it? Did the review include all lesson materials? Did they also evaluate whether the lessons fall under the state's family life education statutes, which also afford opt-out? Please make public the legal opinion, whether it was written or oral. We challenge the board's decision to circumvent and publicly criticize parent objections to the Equity Week lessons. We spoke to parents across the district who had formally expressed their concerns and objections about Equity Week lessons to school or district leaders. In contrast to what you said, Ms. Cartha, on October 7th, these parents aren't ignorant or in need of further education from the district. From our perspective, they understand the district's position, but they disagree with it, respectfully, but sincerely. They did read the lessons themselves, Ms. Cartha. I read every single lesson, and I'm an expert in curriculum. We made, as other parents did, an informed decision about our child's participation and felt that the lessons weren't school appropriate. The last thing that I want to challenge you on in the interest of time is the district's ongoing decision to allow the display of flags and political signs and symbols in schools and classrooms. It doesn't matter if the signage or the slogans seem benign or seem aligned with the district mission. Please consider that you're advocating particular political views and beliefs, which is in opposition to the oath that you all take as board members. Thank you.
Meg Crewley.
Good evening. My name is Meg Crewley, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm a resident of Evanston and the president of the District 65 Educators Council, representing over 750 educators. In recognition of American Education Week, I would like to thank the school board members and the district administration for all the work you do on behalf of students, families, and educators in District 65. During American Education Week, which is this week, November 18th through 22nd, this week. I'm sorry, I'm having a brain freeze. Americans nationwide will join the National Education Association in raising awareness about the need to provide every child with a quality public education. The 2019 theme, Reach, Educate, and Inspire, honors all the people who work in the nation's public schools that support students and families. This team of people includes everyone from the bus driver, classroom teacher, paraprofessional, custodian, cafeteria worker, nurse, health clerk, administrative staff, substitute, parent volunteers, guards, and countless others. The celebration highlights the importance of bringing together educators, parents, students, and communities in a unified effort to build great public schools. It also reflects NEA's vision of calling upon America to provide public school students with quality schools so that they can grow and achieve in the 21st century. As a union body, DEC has encouraged schools to find little ways to thank people in their school communities for supporting and assisting and educating our students. Such of those include writing a note, saying thanks to a parent volunteer, a bus driver, or a crossing guard, having students write or draw their appreciation for different people in their education, giving others in the school a small token of appreciation, extra box of Kleenex, bringing a cup of coffee, or just taking time to check in with a staff member that is new, a sub in the building, or someone you've never talked to before. DEC would like to publicly recognize all the individuals who make our district quality public school. We know that working together is critical in building strong public schools for our nation's 50 million K-12 students. Thank you.
David Dixon.
Hi, I'm David Dixon. I have 3 children in District 65, 2 at Haven. And so I have some grave concerns. I spoke with one of the interim superintendents about some of my concerns, and I pretty much got a shove off about it. What I've heard, and kind of what I heard at this meeting too, is a lot of platitudes. I think I mentioned 2 of my kids are at Haven. We heard a lot of platitudes about, oh, we're doing all we can, we're fully working with the police, the families and the child's most important, whereas if you've read the newspapers, you know that that is not how the child and is not how the family feels about it. So if you want to be transparent, at least mention that, right? Because it sounds like from the meeting, everything's, it's a scary thing, but it sounds like you're being transparent, but you're not, right? Another thing that I mentioned to one of the interim superintendents was my concern that the bathroom policy will be misused by a sexual predator. If someone comes in right now, and I talked with this with the interim superintendent about it, right now the teachers sometimes use the kids' bathrooms right now, right? And she said, well, I don't know about that, I'll have to check into it. My kids go there. I find out all kinds of information there. I find out information, all the janitorial staff were removed from the school, but you don't hear that here. I have to find out things through my kids because nobody will say anything. So that's not transparency. My concern is that if a male, and not saying that any parent would do this or any teacher, but if somehow some sexual predator gets in and they go to the girls' bathroom and they say, I'm a girl, and they walk in and they basically, if they become nude, your policy is saying that if you call yourself a boy, it's okay to use the girls' bathroom. Whereas that's a violation in my terms. And I think the policy that you have is too broad. You have to consider what people will abuse it. And all I got when I was talking with the superintendent, well, nobody's going to do that. Okay, well, we've got lots of sexual predators here in Evanston that are registered. So I'm not going to risk my child, my children, because you feel confident nobody's going to do that. That is not safe. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Ikey Dixon?
Good evening, my name is Ikey Dixon, and my husband and I have been in District 65 off and on for the last 15 years. And listening to some of the speakers tonight, I wasn't planning on speaking. I'm just going to say a few things, but I believe they said it all. From the first speaker to the last speaker, we have heard the same things over and over and over again. And I have to say, it breaks my heart that you all are failing our children. As a whole, you're failing them. Especially when it comes down to the achievement gap. 15 years in this district, and we still have the same issue. You have hired people to bring about equity, and we still have the same issue. Why is that? As a parent, what it sends the message to me, and I'm sadly to say, is that you don't care. Even if when it comes down to safety, the issue at Haven with the child saying that they were raped, and you tell us that there's an investigation going on, and that you can't share any information. If it was your child that was raped in the middle of the day at a school, would it be acceptable to hear from your local police department, from your school district, oh, it's an ongoing investigation, we can't share anything? I have several members in law enforcement, and one particular family member that have investigated rapes for 5 years. And she told me, Auntie, this could have been wrapped up in 2 days. 2 days. So to hear that it's an ongoing investigation for over a month, it's not good enough. It's not acceptable. And on behalf of every child in this district, this school board, if you can point the finger at the police department, this school board should be applying pressure like nobody's business to that police department to say, we want answers. We want a true investigation. We want DNA. We want our employees swabbed. Whatever it takes to get an answer and to an end of this. This is not acceptable. It's not acceptable to me. It's not acceptable to a lot of parents. And then when it comes down to the LGBTQ plus curriculum, my thing is, did you apply the same type of vigor and the same type of effort to bringing about equity in a curriculum for African Americans and Hispanic students? Was the same intent put put into the curriculum to bring about equity and knowledge for African Americans and Hispanics in their school district as it was for the LGBTQ plus community? Ask yourself those questions. I'm asking you all these questions. Where is the true equity? Where is the true safety? Thank you.
Okay, we will move on to our action items. Please, you've got the motion for the consent agenda.
I move that the Board of Education accept the recommendations outlined in the attached group motion and approve the personnel, appointments, leaves, and separations, track movements, resolution for the dismissal of an educational support staff, September and October Board of Education and Committee meeting minutes, destruction of October 2017 closed session audio recording, and the August-September 2019 list of bills, treasurer's report, and budget amendment.
Second.
Mendoza,
Yes.
Halpern,
Yes.
Tanya Vudi,
Yes.
Hernandez,
Yes.
Chow,
Yes.
Lindsay Ryan,
Yes.
Partha,
Yes. Joey, have the approval of the FY19 financial audit?
I move that the Board of Education approve the fiscal year 19 financial audit for District 65 and Park School as presented.
Second.
Mendoza,
Yes.
Halpern,
Yes.
Tanya Vudi,
Yes.
Hernandez,
Yes.
Chow,
Yes.
Lindsay Ryan,
Yes.
Partha,
Yes. Sergio, you've got the next one?
I move that the Board of Education approve the 5-year capital project recommendations as presented.
Second.
Mendoza,
Yes.
Halpern,
Yes.
Tanya Vudi,
Yes.
Hernandez,
Yes.
Chow,
Yes.
Lindsay Ryan,
Yes.
Partha,
Yes. And I should just mention that we're kind of flying through these because we discussed all of these at our last finance meeting. So there's more information at that board meeting if anybody has additional questions. Candace, you got the next one?
Yes. I move that the Board of Education approve the truth and taxation resolution for tax year 2019.
Second.
Mendoza,
Yes.
Halpern,
Yes.
Tanya Vudi,
Yes.
Hernandez,
Yes.
Chow,
Yes.
Lindsay Ryan,
Yes.
Partha,
Yes.
I move that the Board of Education adopt the resolution abating the work cash fund of District 65.
Second.
Mendoza,
Yes.
Halpern,
Yes.
Tanya Vudi,
Yes.
Hernandez,
Yes.
Chow,
Yes.
Lindsay Ryan,
Yes.
Partha,
Yes. And then our next few motions are going to be to go into closed session during the first week of December to do finalist interviews. There will be a more formal update forthcoming, but we did conduct first-round interviews last week and have selected finalists, and we will have more information to share about what the remaining process will look like. But the next motions are to go into closed section so we can conduct those finalist interviews. So, Rebecca?
I move that the Board of Education approve and schedule a closed meeting for December the 2nd, 2019, beginning at 5:30 p.m. to be held at the Joseph E. Hill Education Center for the purpose of discussing appointment, employment, compensation, performance of specific employees of the public body.
Second.
Mendoza,
Yes.
Halpern,
Yes.
Tanya Vudi,
Yes.
Hernandez,
Yes.
Chow,
Yes.
Lindsay Ryan,
Yes.
Partha,
Yes.
I move that the Board of Education approve and schedule a closed meeting for December 3rd, 2019, beginning at 5:30 p.m. to be held at the Joseph E. Hill Education Center for the purpose of discussing the appointment, employment, compensation, performance of specific employees of the public body.
Second?
Mendoza,
Yes.
Halpern,
Yes.
Tanya Vudi,
Yes.
Hernandez,
Yes.
Chow,
Yes.
Lindsay Ryan,
Yes.
Partha,
Yes.
I also move that the Board of Education approve and schedule a closed meeting for December 4th, 2019, beginning at 5:30 PM to be held at the Joseph E. Hill Education Center for the purpose of discussing the appointment, employment, compensation, performance of specific employees of the public body.
Second.
Mendoza?
Yes.
Halpern?
Yes.
Tanya-Vudi?
Yes.
Hernandez?
Yes.
Chow?
Yes.
Lindsay Ryan?
Yes.
Cartha?
Yes. And then with that, we will move on to our discussion topics, the first of which will be the annual discipline report for the last school year. So,
Thank you very much.
preface that.
As you know, every year we do the annual report, which includes both the out-of-school suspension and also the office discipline referral with that. And tonight, Kylie and Andali will be giving you a report on that, and then we'll have a discussion based on the data and what it means. It's all yours.
And thank you for the 6-page memo in advance, which we all read.
It's all ready.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Technical difficulties are over. All right, thank you for your patience while we got connected here. I am excited to share this overview of last year's discipline data with you. I'd like to begin with some considerations related to our interpretation of data through an equity lens. Firstly, I would like to just read these, and then we'll talk about why we have them really briefly. So data in education has at times been used to perpetuate inequality and to justify outcomes that should be unacceptable in a system committed to equity. This reality is present even as District 65 seeks to use data to inform equitable decision-making. Additionally, when aggregate data show that members of a particular student demographic group score below benchmarks, or in this case, have disciplinary incidents, these outcomes reflect opportunity gaps or institutionalized bias and racism, which are faced by marginalized groups due to institutional racism in the education system, and for many families, insufficient social and economic supports. These results should not be used to draw conclusions about the efforts, abilities, or strengths of these students or their families. District 65 aims to be transparent about the structurally reinforced opportunity gap by comparing the performance of white students, students who have structural advantages, to students of color. The district recognizes the limitations of such a comparison and the potential for normalizing whiteness. Further, when aggregate data show that groups in District 65 are outperforming state or national averages, or that the score gaps or gaps in disciplinary incidents are similar to those at the state and national level, these results do not mean that the district can have any less urgency in its efforts to promote equity. Students and families of Pacific Islander and Native American descent and students whose gender identities are non-binary are all important members of the District 65 community. For confidentiality reasons, because the actual numbers of students in those groups are small, the district cannot report on some outcome measures as they would be potentially identifiable. Now, the reason that we begin with this, and I think it's really important to do, is even in looking at our data and trying to interrogate it and understand what we see in the data, we want to be mindful and aware of the normalization of whiteness that occurs with that. I'd also like to highlight the fact that Houston Independent School District was inspired by our equity statements related to how we analyze and interrogate data. And in their last board report, they actually kind of harvested some of the ideas and language in ours and attributed it to us, of course. But they recognize the importance and the value of communicating to their community and their families why there are limitations in the analysis and why we have to be mindful of attribution of what we see in the data. Now, I'd like to share that there are some really positive trends in this data that several people have commented on. We see a decline in the number of suspension incidents, the number of students suspended, and very importantly, fewer days suspended per year. We had a really remarkable decline in the number of days suspended. So in the prior year, last year, 244 lost days of instruction due to suspensions. And in this past year, only 140 days. That's a huge gain in instructional time for our students to be within our schools. And I just want to applaud the efforts of our educators and our school-based staff for working with and prioritizing students and trying to take every opportunity to keep students engaged in schools. I love it when people clap for good data. That's wonderful. And clap for the efforts of our educators. I'd like to also talk about just kind of the overall declines. It's important that when looking at these numbers that you remember to compare them to school enrollment, because as school enrollment may decline or fluctuate, the number of incidents is really proportional to the number of students in the school. So we didn't have any schools that dramatically lost students, but it's important to just note that school enrollment should be considered. So for example, this year the population at all three of our middle schools increased, so the rate of incidence per student could remain constant, if that makes sense. So if the population changes, the number might, look like it's not changing a lot, but as a proportion of the student body, it's a positive trend. Here we see breakouts of out-of-school suspension disaggregated by subgroup. I'd like to specifically call out a 48% decrease in the proportion of suspension incidents involving Black students when compared from the prior year. So in the prior year, we had 91 students. In this last year, so it's 2 years ago, in this last year of data, we see 47. It's a huge and remarkable decline. And again, attributable to the work going on in schools to make sure that students have opportunities to engage and that educators and school staff are, providing every opportunity. We also see a decrease in the number of suspension incidents involving students with IEPs when compared from last year to this year. So going from 65 in the 2018 school year down to 46 in the 2019 school year. Here, I'd like to highlight that the types of incidents remain somewhat consistent this year and last year, with the exception of 3 specific categories. We saw a really substantial decline and decrease in the number of suspension incidents related to disrespect of school authority and disrespectful, aggressive, or threatening behavior, and a decrease in physical violence incidents. Those are sort of the drivers behind the remarkable decline that we're seeing. Highlighting our Alternatives to Suspension program. This was developed in school year 2009 in order to reduce the number of days that students miss instruction as a result of being in out-of-school suspension. There were 24 incidents compared to 66 the prior year. I did speak with colleagues. The staffing levels for this program remained consistent. There was a decline in the number of suspensions overall. And so you would expect also to see a decline in the number of alternative to suspensions that are offered. If suspensions are declining, you also have a decline in that, right? They're interrelated. Office of Discipline referrals. Last year was still kind of PBIS, but also the transitional period where we're moving into more restorative justice practice. And this data shows ODRs. In the future, this data will be SSDs, which are the student support data. Thank you. And so just noting that so that next year when we're having this conversation, you can kind of understand that difference. Here we see, again, really positive trends, decreases in the percent of all students with major ODRs from last year, decrease in the percent of white students and black students with major ODRs, decrease in the percent of students who have IEPs with major ODRs, decrease in the percent of Latinx students with major ODRs. So I'd like to open it up to dialogue and conversation and invite my colleagues who also would want to speak to the data to join me in a discussion if you would like.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Do we have questions, Joey?
I have two quick, they're not questions. The first one is about the referral tables that was in our packet by school. And shout outs to Washington, Willard, and Rhodes for having no incidents and no students worthy of that level of discipline, which means that they're handling those 1,300 students and incidents that happen with that mass of kids in different ways, which is awesome. And Washington and Willard, who haven't had data on this table for 3 years. That's remarkable, so kudos to them. The other was, I was really happy that you noted the incident types and where the drop happened, because when you look at that list, right, some are pretty black and white. Whether someone brought a weapon to school is different than whether someone was disrespectful. And so the engagement with the human is what those three pieces require, and so clearly some of that is working. So thank you for highlighting that.
Thank you.
So first, thank you, Kylie, for the data, and I think we all have to acknowledge that this is significant and really meaningful progress, and that's thanks to all of our principals and our administrators and our educators and the people in this room and our families who are in this journey to restorative work with us, and we're all growing our capacity around that. So that's very much appreciative, and I know that we're looking at a tranche of 4 years in most of the data, and as I had mentioned before, we really began this work in the 2014, 2015 year, so I took it upon myself to go back and look at some of that data. So there have been phases of the work, and the last year has been a renewed phase and lots of success, but also taking the long view of the first year that there were some policy changes made to us in advance of SB 100. So a couple of things I wanted to point out. If you take that view, we actually have a 69% decrease in the number of black students over that, I guess it's a 5-year period, that are receiving suspensions. We have impacted disproportionality, probably not as much as we want, but that's gone from, by about 10% reduction over that time. And it really, I think, is important to note that we've gone then we were at 267 days of lost instruction, and now down to 140 days of lost instruction. So that's a really long-term commitment that we continue to make impact on. So thank you all for not only doing this for 1 year, but continuing the work for as long as it will take for us to get where we need to be. So I just wanted to note that. You know, as I try to take also a critical eye of, okay, so what other things might this show? I did note, you know, while you had said that clearly there's been a reduction in the number of IEPs, students with IEPs, which was a big concern in the last year, and I think that's great. Over the course of that time, the proportion of totals, now obviously the numbers have gone down dramatically, but that's then changed the distribution. And so we now have about 52% of all the suspensions that are coming within that population of IEP students versus it was about 40%, 39%. You know, a while back. So, or 36%, sorry. I was hoping maybe you could speak to that, or someone could speak to that in terms of, is that something you've identified, and what are we continuing to do to ensure that, you know, we aren't disciplining students because of their IEP designation,
Yeah.
and how that's showing up in the work that we're doing at the school level.
Yes, thank you. Those are great questions. First, I'd like to thank you for elevating and highlighting going back to 2014. You're right, we do include longitudinal data, but as every year progresses, we're updating for every year, so that year fell off, and I apologize for that. You're right, it's notably remarkable, and it should also be lauded, so thank you for elevating those. In regard to the questions about students with IEPs and the shifting, as we discussed earlier, with those main categories being the categories that changed, those categories that are related to things like, you know, in class, you know, disrespect and things of that nature. There are fewer students with IEPs who were receiving suspensions for that, right? I think that our educators understand that for some students, situations are triggering, and then it's a manifestation of the disability, and they don't necessarily hold, they recognize that in the environmental kind of triggers. And so when we see the dramatic change in the decline is coming from changes within these disrespect categories, it's disproportionately affecting students without IEPs more so. So when I look at the data, and I'd like the opportunity to dig into it further with my colleagues and really look at it more deeply, especially with our special education colleagues. To me, when I kind of dig in at first glance, that's what I see, is that the dramatic changes are coming in, as Joey put it, these sort of interactive, three main interactive things with between adults and children, adults and students. And so that, to me, helps us understand that proportionality. Another thing I'd like to highlight, and I spoke with Andalip earlier, is the fact that these are incidents. And so while it's 46 incidents, it's not necessarily 46 individual students. And so that's something to also note.
Thank you. That's an interesting hypothesis, and so I think it will be great if you...
Well, I'll just add to that, which is that they were also spread across 11 schools. So I think, while I think the goal is really to attend to the needs of the individual students, and I do know that that 52% is spread across, so it's not like you have one school that, there may be one or two schools that maybe had higher rates where we will definitely dig into it, but the rest of those 46 incidences are really spread across a number of schools, which states that in some ways, where there were those levels of concern, it was being addressed in a really strategic manner. It wasn't haphazard versus if there was a significantly higher incidence rate of one school where there was just constant, in a sense, suspension of students with IEPs, it would be a little bit different. Or if there was a concentration in, let's say, 5 schools, that 52% was from just 5 schools versus all the other schools. In this situation, you're seeing that the distribution is across multiple schools, where you're looking at one incident in one school. So of that 46, you may have 2 or 3, 1 or 2 days from just that school versus 15 days in lots of schools.
Yeah, no, I understand. I was thinking really of the disproportionality of 52% versus whatever the, 13% of students or 16% depending. But I mean, some of that can be explained certainly when you look at incidents versus individual students. So
Yep, and any time that there is a seismic shift like that in the proportionality of any sort of student outcome, be it an assessment outcome or a discipline outcome, we do want to interrogate that and look at that and really understand that. So thank you for elevating that. It's really important that we're mindful of that and that we're reflective about it and that we're looking to better understand.
Thanks. I think the other comment I just would have, and I'm sure it's shared here, so this isn't like I'm saying anything that anybody else wouldn't say, but I'm just going to say it, is as we're having this conversation about discipline, there's the and, not a but the and of safety, right? And folks spoke to that for on a variety of parameters, and so for me, it raises the question of how do we monitor the feeling, perception, and reality of feelings of safety for students, staff, and families in our district. And I know we have some ways of doing that, through 5 Essentials, but I do think that, again, as we're moving towards really trying to keep kids in school and restorative practices, and we're also trying to ensuring safe and welcoming and inclusive environments, those two work hand in hand. So just, how do we think about that and how might we look at that on a periodic basis as well?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, just one comment to that was that safety is the goal of restorative practices. It is the goal. And what we have learned is that zero tolerance policies and exclusion don't lead to increased safety. And I can say that I was just at the National Safety Conference last week. How we attend to the needs of students and the supports they require leads to safety. And so the more our educators and our system works to prioritize that, this was led by the Secret Service, the conference I attended, and was really about how we support the multi-tiered systems of support that we are putting in, the different levels of attention we're putting to how students, what their needs are going to lead to safety. Exclusion, by and large, has very little research as leading to safety. So I would just underscore that. Anybody who says, well, what about safety and how can we, well, let's talk about what the need is. What are the needs for those students and what are the needs for that we need to put in place to support those children to make sure that they're successful. That's going to lead to real safety, not anything that we, in our old way of thinking, punitive. I'm not saying this is what you were saying, but I would just say that I think we have to really consider how we are, as a system, working on that. And I think that Romy, who's unfortunately Director for Special Services, who could not be here this evening, we've been speaking a lot about the procedures and protocols we have in place to ensure that we can strengthen that our confidence in the way in which we're attending to bullying, attending to all the various challenges that do emerge school, that we can make sure that our protocols are always getting tighter so that we know that there's cross discussions across needs and not just siloed work. A lot of times the siloed work that happens in schools, let's say the social worker but the teacher aren't talking together about the need of a student, that those are being attended to so that we can improve the safety. Because I would agree with you, they become misnomers or competitive ideas, but I would challenge that we have to make sure that they stay together.
Thank you, Annalie.
And I want to underscore what you said, Annalie, and for me, I really appreciate some of the strategies that were listed on this report. So we're looking at alternative suspensions, right? And particularly that family counseling piece. So to me, it's critical that we, again, find out what the students' needs are and the family's needs, and then meet them where they're at in order to address whatever issues might be impacting the way they act out in a classroom, right? So to me, whatever lines we can draw to however many supports that we have created in this district from 2008 and from our former colleagues and colleagues who are here now who've laid the groundwork for this, the better, right? Because I think, when we talk about measurement, right, and for me, children are more than a score. Children are more than a park or whatever they call it now, IAR. They're also social and emotional beings. So again, we as a board have been committed to trying to develop these supports in an equitable way that meet children and families where they're at, right? So these measurements, along with standardized test scores, along with some of the work that we're laying out and the capacity building we're trying to do with our educators to lay out this work, give us a complete picture of how our children can develop in a way that improves their outcomes, academically, social, emotionally, and physically. So, thank you for this, and again, just this good news that's coming out.
I think it's fair to say that all of us share a commitment to not feeling like we've fully achieved success until the racial disparity is eliminated. But it's really important to celebrate victories along the way. And so I think when people are asking questions about, what are you doing about all these things and what does all this equity work mean, explicitly and implicitly, our Beyond Diversity, our SEED, our climate work, our CRP, our social emotional learning, all of these things have focused on disrespect and trying to understand kind of, people's cultural lenses on those things. And so I'm really excited to see this number move in the way that it has, because it to me demonstrates that these investments are really having an impact, and it does not at all suggest that we should take our foot off the gas. The urgency still exists, and we need to continue to unpack. When we're looking at the IEP data, we also want to look at that intersectionally, right? What's going on in terms of race and IEPs? Is there a disproportionate amount of students of color who have IEPs that are experiencing high discipline still? But I think, I hope everyone who's been involved in all of these different interventions and strategies feels like a collective breath of, okay, we're headed in the right direction. We need to keep moving forward, because I think this is exactly where we need to be going. So thank you.
I'll just build on that this morning the cabinet was discussing some of the strategy work that's happening right now in the district. And to your point, last year was our first year where we had two dedicated restorative practice coaches across all our middle schools that really prioritize working with our middle schools. And we saw early returns on those supports, and as a result of that, we came to the board and we said we'd like to add another restorative practice coach. We'd also like to add support around assistant principals as a result of the kind of early returns we were seeing, and also the board's commitment around the discipline policy and really wanting to ensure that our framework could get some legs and movement underneath it to, as we unveiled this year, a district-wide behavior continuum and a restorative practice framework that's got a 3-year long-term plan that the board heard in the spring about. And so all of that was really due to the work of the leadership of Joyce Bartz, Teresa Quinn, and Megan Navarra last spring, who really spearheaded that work. And then our continuing this year, we have a new restorative practice coach, Maddie Line Lagone, and then also we have identified working with principals, restorative practice leads in every one of our schools. So now you have their leadership plus the leadership through the school climate teamwork. That was really the foundation of this change in culture that's been going on for many years. And now we've got restorative practice leads on school climate teams that are supporting the restorative practice work. So it's really, to your point, that celebration of like, we're moving in the right direction, and this does give us a sense of reinforcing that this is the right way to go for us, and we can't simply move away. We are moving towards something which is exciting for the district to support that work. So I want to thank those individuals for their leadership in getting us here.
Any other questions?
Yes, just to answer one of our public comment questions from earlier today, the decrease in alternative to suspensions is due to a decrease in length of suspension. Is that correct, or what is the answer to that?
So if a student, and Andalib can speak to this, but this is my understanding, if a student is potentially going to get a suspension, there's an option to offer an alternative to that suspension. That alternative is only offered, though, if there is a potential suspension. So if fewer behaviors are resulting in a possible suspension, we have a corollary drop in the number of alternatives that are then offered, right? Fewer suspensions, fewer possible suspensions mean fewer offers of getting an alternative, if that makes sense. So as you see that decline, you see this decline as well. They're like,
yeah, it's not that we're not offering it, it's just that there's
less people are hitting that threshold where that's offered.
yes, staffing levels are still consistent, those supports are still provided. Family counseling is still a part of the district strategy and still something that schools will offer. We see that as a really valuable tool for helping provide restorative supports, and I think that continues in the behavior continuum and other options and the new discipline policy that was pushed out by this board in June. So, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? I would echo all, this is really exciting data to see, that at least we are trending in the right direction. And I don't know if there's a way to speak to Candace's point. I do think, I wholeheartedly support our move towards restorative practices and the focus that we have on that. But I do think to the community, there could be a disconnect in, us celebrating these numbers and celebrating restorative practices with maybe what they feel like they're experiencing or their children are experiencing in school. So I don't know if when we're giving this report next year, with the kind of like increased focus on restorative practices this year and with the increased staffing supports, I don't know if there's, I'm not really sure how we would quantify that, but I don't know if there's a way when we're giving the discipline report next year, which hopefully will continue to show positive, trending information this way, if we can somehow include the narrative of how restorative practices fits in to this story, and is helping to lessen the number of suspensions, lessen the number of ODRs, and is really being utilized for the purpose that we want it to be utilized, keeping kids in classrooms.
Well, as I alluded to earlier, we have made a shift starting in this academic school year to a new system. And as part of that shift to the new system, there were changes made to some of the underlying data categories for how information is being tracked. And so the team that Anjali mentioned earlier also worked to develop this new information system. So there's some differences that just want to make you guys aware of in terms of looking at the data longitudinally over time. But there are some alterations to the types of categories. And also additional layers that allow us not only to know what the incident, quote unquote, was, but what was the response to the incident? What were the interventions that were put into place to support the student? Were peace circles utilized? What were some of the different options that maybe the teacher deployed in order to address the needs of the student, in order to repair potential harm between the classroom community? And so we not only have insight, we won't only have insight into the types of incidents, but we will also have insight into what were kind of the outcomes that occurred that supported kids. And so we'll be able to kind of dig in and explore and examine that further. I am cautious about getting too excited because it is a new year of data and a new year of a new data system, and that data is always kind of wonky out of the gate. And so as people are using something that's new, there are some change management procedures that go into place with new data collection methods and measures, and so just want to mention that. But it should give us additional opportunities to learn more about practices.
Okay. Fantastic, thank you. No, I think that will be really informative then as part of the discussion next year. And the only other sort of comment question that I had is around the table about office discipline referrals for major infractions. And I know that these numbers are, not necessarily, I guess this is the percent of students with one or more office discipline referrals. So these numbers are not looking as good, and so there's a little bit of work to be done there. I don't know if we know, it's great the reduction in suspensions for disrespectful or disruptive behavior. I mean, I know that there has been a lot of intentional work around, understanding the biases that that come into play when those are used. I don't know if we have any breakdown on what the major infractions, like what the ODRs are for, and if there's any, I mean, given the percentages, I'm going to assume that there's not a corresponding drop there, but if that's something too to just think about, that it's not just the suspensions that are taking kids out of the classroom. The ODRs are also, maybe not for the day, but for a period of time, are taking them out of instruction. And so we want to be mindful of why kids are being, and again, maybe with the new student support data, we'll be able to dig into that a little bit more, but
Yeah.
just something to think about too.
Yeah, thank you. That's also data that is important and that we want to be mindful of. It's why we include it here. And schools look at it too in their school work planning and in their ongoing reflection. Schools are reviewing and looking at their data on an ongoing basis and kind of are able to look at it on an individual level, which helps them kind of get those insights. But yes, and the major minor designations are also different starting this year. So this year will be a real baseline year for us. So next year's report will be a very different set of information.
All right, great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you again for the work that's taken place around this table, the work that's happening in schools by principals and teachers and educators. It is, I think we are seeing the fruits of years of work really starting to pay off. And again, not to say that we're done, but it's good to know that we are moving in the right direction. And I hope that that everyone can look at this and feel good about the direction we're moving in and that the work has mattered and all the trainings have mattered. So thank you all. We have a couple of FYI topics, the monthly FOIA report, and then the Illinois State School report card is an FYI, but I know, Phil, you wanted to make some comments on it.
Board, as you probably know, the state report card this year has some new data. One of those is the site-based expenditures, and we're pleased that the finance department got recognized by the state on that, and they're now one of the models that we're using, so congratulations, Rob. Also, another good news we wanted to share with the board tonight is that the ratings that we have that have come out, all of our schools are now in the commendable and exemplary area except for Chute, and they have one area which we still need to focus upon, and that is in the area of EL students. So we'll continue to work on that matter as well, but we have made progress, and I think that's important to note. We still have plenty of work to do. The state assessment, as Sergio mentioned, is now IAR, and there was the old park with that. And we talked today in cabinet, and Kali, I thought if you could just give a little summation of, with the park and the IAR, are we comparing apples to oranges or oranges to tangelos? Might be a good analogy to use for that.
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, they're all fruit. No, that's a good question. So as you may know, last year the state stopped administering park in favor of the Illinois Assessment of Readiness. Both assessments are standards-based on the standards of our state, also called the Common Core State Standards. The assessment item bank that they used for park is where they drew the questions that they used for IAR. So it's not the same assessment per se, but the questions are comparable. And so the state has communicated that while they're not looking at the data together longitudinally because the assessment length is different and so forth, the IAR is a shorter assessment, so it takes less time for students to take the assessment than the park did. The items, the questions that kids are asked are from the same bank. And so they measure very similar things. In the report card, although the state doesn't show them side by side, kind of did a little data magic where I showed you the distribution of what we look like under park and the distribution of what we look like under IAR, so you could get a sense of any kind of differences during this transitional period. I think Stacy and I spoke earlier, we expect that they will do IAR, although official communication is as yet forthcoming. I open it up to any further questions or comments from colleagues, but I hope that that helps provide more information. I'll also say that I'm excited to report that with Melissa and Fred, we put together a web tutorial on how to navigate the state report card website for our families and our community members. We are going to be disseminating that. I watched it today. I hate the sound of my voice, but it was okay, I guess. But if you watch it, you'll get to see me clicking on the website and telling you all the cool, you get to see the excitement and the sound in my voice about the data and how cool it is. So I encourage everybody to feel the joy of the state report card data and watch the webinar when we push it out.
All right, great, thank you. Did anybody have any additional questions? Candace?
Sorry. Joy.
This is a question and a bit of a comment. So he's gone, he's left, but I wanted to point out, in concert with what Mr. Wilson had said, I did go back and look at some of the third grade data, and as Biz said earlier, it's important for us, we still have a lot of work to do.
Yes.
But to look for nuggets of where we're seeing investment and return. And so I just wanted to lift up that I had looked through Kingsley's data and saw that, 80% of students at third grade are meeting proficiency. I know that there has been some focus work through Stacy and your team as we're piloting, and I hold that up because it's the one I looked at, and it's also, I'm close to it because my kids went there all the time. And I knew it was a focus of, Dr. Green's work, and so I was hoping maybe you could speak to, that's something I saw, and clearly an improvement there for our Black students, not where it needs to be, but 46% of Black students were proficient in math and 39 in ELA in third grade at that school. And so trying to build from a place of strength, is there anything else you might see, or either expand on that, or color around that, or other places where you're seeing spaces that we can build and grow from?
I think just a couple quick things. Specifically the third grade data, when we look at IAR, it's one of the things, especially when assessment tools are shifting, I try to look for multiple points of data to try to figure out where we are. We did talk about the fact in the spring that the third grade data in our one-to-one literacy assessments was also stronger this past year than we had seen. And when I look across district-wide in literacy, the differential between the state average and the district average is greatest in third grade as well. And so there does seem to be some very nice positive evidence points to look at around growth and achievement in literacy in third grade. And that is that first grade where we are assessing with IAR. We see that in the one-to-one literacy assessments, and we're now seeing it in IAR. So we'll continue to really focus in. We are really doing more coaching work. I think lifting the cognitive rigor focus this year with the restorative practices we really see as being critical levers to accelerating growth and continuing, ideally, to build on some of the foundational work we've set up around shifts in curriculum. I think another just general area of strength as we look, when we look in third, fourth, and fifth grade at math, our fifth grade group is the area where we're seeing the highest levels of achievement and also the greatest differential between the state average and the district average. And in that space, we're also seeing slightly smaller gaps between our Black and Latinx students and our white students. And so we are, it's a changing test, so it's hard to know how to read into your tarot cards in many ways, but we are trying to figure out, how do we look across data points and try to figure out how we can lean into trends and learn. Additionally, I know, Dr. Kilgatti has done a lot of work around strategic planning with principals, and I think we could, specifically when we looked at the Kingsley plan last year, they were very, very focused on math, and they had some regular cycles that were set up within their school's design for professional learning. And they also partnered very well with the district math team last year in that work.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I know that for actually 3 years, Tricia Murray and her school improvement team have been working on really thinking about the math block and flexible grouping. I know that Dr. Green last year was engaged in work with the Black Student Success coaches there, and with just one?
There's
Okay,
just
one. You're a coach as well. That's good. Support. So there was a lot of coaching support for both the principal and with the staff there, with the instructional coach there as well. But I would say that that strategic planning goes back 3 years. There's a focus, if you look in 2017, their school work plan names small group work, names culture and climate, names these big blocks that we are focusing on as a district and how they are lifting that strategically in that school. And so I think it's a model for all our schools. The more closely you get into really addressing the learning needs of the adults to be able to build their capacity to support children, you get results.
If I can share a data highlight that excited me, related to the Dynamic Learning Maps assessment, which is the assessment for students with cognitive disabilities, we saw a really wonderful improvement in performance outcomes for mathematics in particular, with a very dramatic increase in the students scoring in the advanced category. That increase was primarily driven by our Latinx population of students. And so I think, there are pockets of improvement happening across demographic groups, across schools, across student populations. And so there are a lot of things that we can learn from looking at this data and digging in, usually using the interactive tool. And so thank you for wanting to elevate those kind of areas that we can learn from. But I thought that was really remarkable.
Anything else? Well, thank you very much. I encourage everyone to take a look at the website and dig into, because the school report card, it does give a great deal of information. And so I think it's definitely worth looking into, and I appreciate that you guys put together kind of a tutorial for it. I think that'll be really helpful for families, and I know I will be looking at it, so thank you very much for that. So with no further business, I adjourn this meeting at 8:52 p.m. Thank you all.